One of the most engaging and long-teetering arcs of the Haikyuu series is the push and pull between the Great Seijo team and the rebuilding of Karasuno High, both balancing in an aggressive back and forth that ultimately shows both sides' thematic flaws and positions them as foils of each other, as they, by the end of Season 2, both grow from the experience toward a brighter future and understanding. So this isn't a look at the full series, just from the start to the end of Season 2, but I really think that section, it's worth looking at the inciting feud that drove the first 2 seasons, and to an extent some of Season 3, to be so personally compelling to myself and obviously countless others. I want to look at, explain, and examine how both Karasuno and Oikawa overcame their biggest weakness. Aoba Johsai's practice match in a lot of ways gives this awkward and kind of off vibe in the start of the series. It starts with an episode that has a cloudy sky, almost certainly looking like it's going to rain, but never really reaching any sort of payoff. It's never acknowledged that they spend multiple minutes outside, and Karasuno takes a lighthearted, intimidating role that is played for laughs and friendly competition. Suddenly, though, it soured a bit as one of the relationships that Kageyama previously had with a person who is now on Aoba Johsai throws the name King at him, obviously not a compliment, and he almost emotionlessly responds to it. It's an issue he still hasn't got a good grasp of this early in the series. It's only episode 6, and I think Kageyama realizes that his actions in the past in middle school were inappropriate and costed him more than just a game or two, but his relationships, and even the ability to do what him and Hinata strive for the most, to be on the court. It's like he feels no right to aggressive retort, but neither has he grown enough to confidently proclaim any difference, so after a brief quiet where it almost seems like he may be hurt by the words, he emotionlessly, as I said, accepts the statement as it is, accepting its truth and maybe hoping to disprove something about that with his actions in the actual match. Even Hinata shares the same feelings, as in a separate scene with Pinecone just a minute later about Kageyama, they both crap on different parts of Kageyama's personality. But while Pinecone sees his flaws more cynically and seems to have frustratedly given up on him, Hinata sees his difficult personality as a simple rival and a way to push his own abilities in ways that he hasn't yet. Because, as we saw, Pinecone was one of many on the team who literally abandoned Kageyama for the cruel behavior, while Hinata rose to Kageyama's challenge and pushed back on him just as strong. You get this stillness with Pinecone. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Pinecone. Hinata calls him that in the show, and it's really funny. Pinecone saying that Kageyama is self-serving and that his serves are impossible to hit, but with the dramatic irony of knowing already that Hinata can reach the challenge, and that it may not be as self-serving as one thinks, or that it could easily grow and adapt from that. The probably best part of how they deal with this setup of our introduction to Aoba Johsai is keeping Oikawa unmentioned and away until right as it's mentioned that their current setter doesn't seem like their primary one. Then the weight drops, Oikawa steps in for the first time, and you see the shock on Kageyama's face. It's a great way of immediately showing the power and clear narrative relevance to the characters of the power of Oikawa, not just as a player, but as a person, as someone who pulls the team together. And while their victory is incredibly cathartic in this practice match, literally catching Oikawa off guard and impressing him with the quick attack, leaving him frozen, he only came in when Karasuno was 1 point from victory, and he managed to get 3 points in a row, almost upsetting the entire match at the last second. On top of that, he needed to rest and wasn't even taking things too seriously. This does a good job of keeping his full skill still unseen while giving him a very threatening aura and competence for Karasuno, and leaving the audience to put together the difference Kageyama and him make, as Oikawa is a character designed to be specifically Kageyama's foil. But they win here, so let's move on to the end of Season 1, leading up to their true first real match against Aoba Johsai, and how people describe Oikawa as a player leading into that match. Now, I'll be the first to admit that despite being super proud of how my last Haikyu video came out, I did Oikawa kinda dirty. This is mainly because I was focusing on his bad mentality earlier on in Season 1 and Season 2, and how the idea it represented stood in the plot to contrast Hinata's character arc. Because of this, I didn't really go into how he grew as a person, and I didn't spend any of what I thought was unnecessary time fleshing out the aspects of him that I didn't think contributed to the point of the video. We're gonna change that a bit here. It is no doubt that Oikawa's charisma is his greatest strength. His ability to read and understand people is repeated ad nauseum before Karasuno begins their Season 1 match with him. From coaches, to audience members, to assistants and players, there is one literally repeated idea that in terms of raw setting ability, at this point, he is stated to be no better at setting than any other setter on Aoba Johsai. But that his strength is his great understanding of how and who to give opportunities, quickly reading the feelings and morale that makes them shine. This emphasis puts him as a mirror opposite of Kageyama, someone extremely talented at visualizing and positioning the ball in the best place regardless of team, and someone extremely talented at comprehending and managing the mental positions of teammates and, within reason, expectations, with slightly limited ability to carry through. It's from looking at them in this pure foil behavior that we can see Kageyama as the weaker player. While they both shine in each other's weaknesses, Oikawa is still a competent and skilled player in terms of his technical execution. But Kageyama is a woefully under-equipped team player, not really being able to get in the heads of his cohorts. It's still a close game, but Haikyu still felt fair when they lost. Like, the devastation caught me off guard being unspoiled, but it made total sense with what we knew about the characters, which obviously lends to the series' great writing. One of the best scenes in Haikyu for me is the eating scene ending episode 24, and I doubt very many people would challenge me on this. For over a minute, there is this blank silence slowly filling up with nothing but eating sounds. These grim faces, people we have seen lit with joy, anger over losses, stressed and sweating, screaming and laughing. These characters who, aside from their brief reflective moments, have rarely been so modest, are totally taken aback with that stillness that will grow into an understanding for the future. This is the story of them growing, and pushing past that though. And if you've paid attention thus far, you'd probably think that my claim about Karasuno's great weakness is a lack of cohesion. Despite possessing uniquely powerful characters, their ability to work as a unit just isn't there yet, at least on the tier of Aoba Johsai. But I think it's deeper than that, and actually really mirrors Oikawa's weakness, and more so what Oikawa overcomes and states right before Aoba Johsai loses their rematch in Season 2. Words that fit both teams perfectly. Before I repeat those words though, I want to help visualize something, and I know that a few people probably won't care about this as much, but I want to tell you about a dream I had earlier this week that honestly made me wake up feeling really down. There was a large group of people in a tournament, and I was one of them. There were no teams, just one-on-one, and the goal was to start on opposite ends of a slightly elevated platform on the ground and push the other person off. That's all the competition was made of. I was busy and didn't participate in the practice tournament, but I did perform in the real tournament the next day. In the first round, I was up against the second place winner of the practice tournament and managed to beat them. Meaning, in my mind, in the dream, in theory, I could take the entire tournament easily, since I beat the second best in the first round. I went to the audience where my family and friends were and talked with them while waiting to listen for my call of the start of round 2 and beyond. But I never heard it. I eventually became scared. I missed my name and saw matches from 3 and 4 start. I went up to ask an officiator of the event when my next match was going to be after spending time talking with family and friends, and he said I missed my name being called and was disqualified from the tournament. I didn't get another chance. I didn't get a placement. It was over for me. I could have won, but I wasn't there. In Season 2, before Aoba Johsai loses the rematch against Karasuno, Oikawa reflects on something his coach had told him, and his obsession with the idea of being a genius and monsters of the court, an idea I criticized in my last Haikyu video, I think very rightfully so. But something I didn't bring up there is, I think, the most important part of this speech, really. Oikawa remembers what his coach said, stating some of it out loud to his teammates at the end. Today might be the day to grasp the chance to let your talent bloom. Maybe tomorrow, the day after, or next year, maybe even when you're 30. Finishing with, but if you think it will never come, it probably never will, as he confidently strides back into the court. If someone wasn't observant, they might think of this as a typical Oikawa behavior and mindset, but his teammates even note to themselves how much Oikawa has seemingly grown as a person as he leaves, literally stating, wow, he's really changed. And so, it comes down to that. Talent, geniuses, whoever may be considered a monster, there is no way to account for all the variables that would validate and verify those ideas. People will never have the full picture of a person's life and abilities in any fair capacity. There's too much data to analyze. So remember instead, if you want something, and it doesn't seem totally impossible, the number one thing to do to get there is to not get distracted. Not get hung up in self-pity, not fall into hopelessness. That's the way to overcome Oikawa and Karasuno team's greatest weakness. And gratefully, they both do come the end of the series, beyond Season 2, even. After Season 1's defeat, Oikawa pushes Kageyama to take note of his players in order to succeed. After Hinata's having a hard time in practice a few episodes into Season 2, he subconsciously starts to consider the other. Hinata takes this as an insult initially, which many of the teammates don't understand, but it shows that sort of consideration that Kageyama is trying to learn how to take, subconsciously and actively, as he plays and analyzes the field. This leads to a fight and a change overall in the training regimen and approach that really snowballs into the rematch we end Season 2 with. In a way, you could say that Aoba Johsai lost because Oikawa realized and let sink in what he'd been told too late. But I think it's more that Oikawa reached the final bit of his mental growth while carrying most of the team on his shoulders with him. Karasuno, meanwhile, had grown together in this same philosophy. I like this interpretation because despite Aoba Johsai and Karasuno being mirrors, foils to each other, people with opposite weaknesses, it's the same mentality that made them overcome their greatest weakness. The dream I had really made me feel down. I realized that this is what I'd been failing to do all this time. Be there. Let the opportunity foster. Maybe I'd done it in the past, but more often than not, I wrote myself off for things I didn't feel naturally good at. And I think that caused me to upload less frequently. Make collabs near non-existent, reach out and meet less people, keep up with conversations other content creators tried to foster. It caused my creativity to be stifled and filled with anxiety, but no more. This needs to be a place for change, and I hope it can be one for you as well. If you didn't know, in my last video I read a letter that I had mailed to myself from 5 years ago, reflecting on how my life has changed. And I've also started posting on my new side channel with lots of more casually consumable but still definitely interesting content. Please continue supporting me on here, on Patreon, and Twitch. Thanks so much to my top patrons, Friendly Neighbor, Daniel Frousing, my name is Klein, Whizbang2093, and I am a guy. Finally, thanks so much for watching. Genuinely. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you'd support with a like and comment. Hope to see you next week with a special video and offer.